Before we begin, I must urge you, do not glamorize the life you are about to hear. This is not a celebration of power, but a cold examination of its cost. What you are about to experience is a reconstruction of a real criminal odyssey, pieced together from court transcripts, FBI files, biographies, and the testimonies of those who lived it. Our only goal is to deliver the unvarnished truth to you, separating the Hollywood myth from the grim reality. If you are here for thrilling tales of mafia glory, you may be disappointed. But if you seek to understand the mechanics of power, the corrosion of the soul, and the inevitable price of a life of crime, then listen closely. And if you want to join us on this journey into the darkest corners of organized crime, make sure you are subscribed. The bell is your ticket to the truth. Now, let us pull back the curtain. The story of Paulie Cicero begins not with a bang, but with a quiet, deliberate calculation in the cramped, immigrant neighborhoods of East New York in the 1940s. Born into a world where legitimate opportunity was a taunting illusion, the young Paulie saw the landscape not as one of poverty but as a chessboard. His power did not spring from muscle or the flash of a gun; those were tools for simpler men. His empire was built on a far more durable currency: information and patience. While other kids scrapped in alleys, Paulie observed. He noted which cops took a free coffee, which shopkeepers were behind on their insurance, and which union bosses had a taste for something stronger than whiskey. He apprenticed not with fists, but with his mind, running small errands for the local capo regime. A forgotten envelope here, a whispered message there. He understood, instinctively, the fundamental rule that would define his entire reign. Visibility was vulnerability. The loudest man in the room was the first target. So, Paulie cultivated silence. He spoke in low, measured tones. He dressed not in flashy suits but in respectable, forgettable clothing. He owned no flashy cars in his own name. He drove modest sedans, or better yet, was driven. His genius lay in structuring a business that was, on the surface, invisible. He operated through a web of seemingly legitimate fronts: a garishly named social club that was his true office, a linen supply company, a pizza joint, a construction firm. These were not just money laundries, they were fortresses. They provided cover, employed loyal soldiers on the books, and created a network of financial flows so tangled it would take accountants decades to unravel. His real product was protection in its most primal form. For a steady percentage, businesses were shielded from the very chaos his associates could unleash. He was not selling violence, he was selling peace, a peace that he alone could revoke. This was the core of his rise. He made himself a necessary component of the neighborhood's ecosystem. He wasn't an external parasite, he was the hidden immune system, one that demanded a constant price. His recruitment strategy was equally subtle. He didn't seek brash killers, he sought young, hungry, and, most importantly, loyal boys from the neighborhood. Boys like Henry Hill, who saw in Paulie not a fearsome gangster, but a benevolent, almost fatherly figure of success. Paulie gifted them a sense of belonging, of family, that was far more potent than any salary. He handed out cash for new suits, smoothed over their petty arrests, and presided over their weddings. He built not just a crew, but a culture. The infamous Goodfellas heist at Lufthansa in 1978 was the ultimate testament to his operational genius, yet it perfectly illustrated his method. Paulie did not plan the heist. He did not carry a gun into the terminal. He likely never touched a single dollar of the $6 million in cash and jewels. But he authorized it. His word was the necessary precondition. He provided the blueprint of access through his connections. He blessed the team, and he laid down the ironclad rule: no spending. This was the pinnacle of his power, orchestrating a seismic criminal event while maintaining complete, plausible deniability. His rise was a masterclass in leveraged influence, a slow, steady climb to a throne that existed in the shadows. He built an empire where his name was on no deed, his signature on no illegal order, yet his authority was absolute. He was the spider at the center of a vast, intricate web, feeling every vibration, directing every move, all while remaining unseen in the dark corner of a dusty social club, sipping espresso and playing cards, a quiet king in a kingdom of noise and greed. By the late 1970s, Paulie Cicero's world was a perfectly calibrated machine, humming with ruthless efficiency. This was his golden age, an era where his philosophy of silent control seemed infallible. The Lufthansa heist, though a tactical windfall, was also the moment the machine began to overheat, though Paulie, in his hubris, likely could not hear the first faint knocks of impending doom. His peak power was not marked by grand palaces or public notoriety, but by the sheer breadth of his invisible reach. From his nondescript headquarters at the Roberts Lounge Social Club, he presided over a portfolio that would be the envy of any corporate titan. His interests extended like silent, deep roots into the very bedrock of New York's economy. The construction industry was a particular specialty. Through a mixture of intimidation and sweetheart deals, his crews controlled the concrete pouring for major projects. If you wanted a building erected in certain boroughs, you bought your concrete from a Paulie-affiliated company, at Paulie's price. The garbage hauling industry was his. Small businesses paid for collection whether they wanted it or not. The airport, John F. Kennedy International, was his personal fiefdom. Through a network of corrupt union officials and terrified freight handlers, he orchestrated a systematic pillaging of the cargo docks. Trucks filled with everything from designer jeans to Scotch whiskey to electronics would simply vanish, their contents seamlessly fed into a nationwide black market. His power even stretched into the world of finance, with elaborate loan sharking operations that preyed on gamblers and desperate businessmen, where the weekly vig, or interest, was collected with a chilling, polite insistence that was more frightening than any overt threat. Paulie himself was the picture of understated success. He lived in a comfortable, but not ostentatious, house in a quiet neighborhood. He was a family man, a respected figure who donated to local charities and was seen at community events. This duality was the essence of his peak. He had achieved the gangster's dream, vast criminal wealth wrapped in a cloak of bourgeois respectability. His authority was so ingrained that it required no demonstration. A single look, a faint sigh of disappointment, was enough to send a tremor through his organization. The men around him, like Jimmy Conway and Tommy DeVito, were the volatile, violent instruments of his will, but Paulie was the steady hand on the throttle. He solved problems with a phone call, not a pistol. He settled disputes between crews with the quiet finality of a judge. His word was law, not because he was the strongest, but because he was the smartest, the most connected, the most indispensable. Yet, this pinnacle was built on a foundation of terrifying internal logic. The legendary rule, never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut, was not just a motto, it was the sacred covenant that held his world together. Loyalty was the only absolute. But the Lufthansa aftermath revealed the first crack in this facade. The sheer, staggering size of the haul, $6 million in untraceable cash, was a temptation too great for the weaker links in his chain. When his soldiers, high on their own success and ignoring his direct order to lay low, began flaunting furs and sports cars, Paulie's control was visibly challenged. His response was not a loud reprimand, but a silent, terrifying purge. One by one, the talkative, the flashy, the unreliable began to disappear. This was the dark underside of his peak power, the absolute, life-or-death authority to erase anyone who threatened the system's secrecy. It was a grim demonstration meant to reassert order, but it also sowed seeds of deep, corrosive fear within the ranks. The family was beginning to fracture under the weight of its own secrets and paranoia. Paulie, sitting at his card table, may have felt he was pruning a tree to strengthen it, but he was actually watching the first leaves fall before a coming storm. The peak was not a plateau, it was the crest of a wave, and the gravitational pull of reality, of federal attention, of human greed, of the inherent instability of an empire based on fear, was already tugging him inexorably downward. The downfall of Paulie Cicero was not a dramatic shootout or a betrayal from a rival family. It was a slow, methodical unraveling, a suffocation by paperwork and the relentless pressure of a new kind of enemy he could not bribe, intimidate, or disappear. The federal government, armed with a revolutionary new weapon, the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO. For decades, Paulie's greatest armor had been his separation from the dirty work. He was a ghost in the machine, untouchable by conventional prosecution. But RICO was designed to prosecute the ghost by proving the existence of the machine itself. It allowed prosecutors to connect the dots between the boss giving an order in a social club and the soldier carrying out a murder miles away, painting them all as parts of a single criminal enterprise. The first tremors came not from the top, but from the bottom, from the very human weaknesses his empire was built upon. The insatiable greed and paranoia that followed the Lufthansa heist had created a toxic atmosphere of mistrust. Men were killed not by rivals, but by their own, on whispers and suspicions. This internal chaos attracted federal attention like blood in the water. Surveillance teams, armed with long-lens cameras and wiretap warrants, began to blanket his world. They didn't need to catch him holding a gun, they needed to catch him in the rhythm of his business. A cryptic comment about a problem being taken care of, a discussion about a union vote, a complaint about a late VIG payment. The walls of his silent world were slowly being lined with microphones. The true collapse, however, was engineered from within by the very concept he held most sacred: family. The younger generation he had nurtured, men like Henry Hill, were not made of the same stern, silent stuff as the old guard. They were products of the flashy, instant gratification world Paulie despised. When the heat became unbearable, when faced with decades in prison, their loyalty proved to be a brittle facade. Henry Hill, a protégé turned desperate informant, did not just provide evidence of crimes, he provided the narrative. He became the tour guide for the FBI, explaining the hidden meaning behind every muttered phrase, every casual meeting, translating the coded language of the streets into a devastating timeline of conspiracy for the jury. Hill's testimony was the skeleton key that unlocked Paulie's entire empire. It gave context to the thousands of hours of wiretaps, turning ambiguous conversations into clear criminal orders. Paulie's greatest strength, his network of loyal, interdependent relationships, became his ultimate vulnerability in the face of RICO. The trial was not a spectacle of violence, but a clinical autopsy of his life's work. The prosecution laid out his kingdom on display like a museum exhibit. Charts mapping his organizational structure, ledgers of his loan sharking operations, tapes of his voice, calm and measured, discussing criminal matters. The myth of the untouchable, sophisticated gentleman gangster was dismantled piece by piece, revealed to be just a thin veneer over a brutal, greedy criminal operation. The jury saw not a charismatic patriarch, but the CEO of a violent corporation. In the end, the silence he cultivated became his prison. He could not rant or rave. To do so would be an admission. He sat, stoic and defiant, but the world he had built was being testified into oblivion around him. The guilty verdict was a formality. The sentence, multiple decades in a federal penitentiary, was not just a punishment, it was an erasure. The man who controlled everything from the shadows was consigned to a small, sunlit cell, his every move monitored, his influence reduced to zero. The downfall was absolute. His assets were seized, his reputation was publicly dismantled, and his legacy was cemented not as a wise king, but as a convicted felon. The empire of silence was finally, irrevocably, silenced by the very system he believed he had outsmarted. So, what remains of Paulie Cicero? His legacy is a complex, cautionary puzzle, a stark lesson in the limits of power built without a moral compass. He exists in the cultural memory not as a hero, but as a dark archetype, the mastermind who believed he was above the fray, only to be consumed by the very chaos he orchestrated. His story strips away the Hollywood sheen of the mafia life, revealing the grimy machinery underneath, the constant paranoia, the betrayal lurking behind every smile, the hollow prize of wealth that can never be enjoyed in the open. In the end, Paulie's code of silence was broken by a louder, more persistent force, the human instinct for self-preservation. The family he built was not a family at all, but a corporation with a blood-drenched bottom line, and when survival was on the line, its employees turned state's evidence. His life stands as a testament to the inevitable failure of a system based solely on fear and greed. There is no retirement plan in that world, only prison or the grave. The quiet, powerful man in the social club died a numbered inmate, his strategic mind useless, his connections severed, his name a footnote in federal case law. Yet, his story endures because it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, loyalty, and the seductive allure of a shortcut to respect. He was not a monster in a dark alley. He was a neighbor, a businessman, a seemingly stable pillar in an unstable world. That is perhaps the most shocking part, the banality of evil, dressed in a cardigan and sipping espresso. He reminds us that the most dangerous criminals are often those who never have to raise their voice, because their power is so deeply woven into the fabric of everyday life that it becomes almost invisible until it is too late. His narrative also serves as a brutal marker of the end of an era. His conviction, powered by RICO and the Witness Protection Program, signaled a fundamental shift. The age of the untouchable, neighborhood-based mob boss was over. replaced by a federal apparatus designed to dismantle such empires from the top down. Paulie Cicero was a relic, a king of a crumbling castle, and his fall showed every aspiring kingpin the new, inescapable rules of the game. Today, his legacy is a ghost in two forms: the chilling, realistic portrayal by Paul Vario in Goodfellas, a performance that captures the terrifying quiet of his power, and the dry, black-and-white text of his court documents. One is myth, the other is reality, and the distance between them is the entire point of this story. The glamour is fiction. The anxiety, the moral decay, the shattered lives left in his wake, that is the true product of his empire. So, as we close this chapter on the silent force behind the Goodfellas, let this be a reminder to look beyond the surface, to question the source of quiet influence, and to understand that any power structure built on the suffering of others carries the seeds of its own destruction within it. Now, it is your turn. You have journeyed into the shadows to see how the machine worked and how it was finally dismantled. If this deep dive into the real stories behind the legends has value for you, if you believe in separating fact from cinematic fiction, then your support defines this channel. Subscribe. Hit the bell icon. By doing so, you're not just watching a video, you are ensuring that these meticulously researched truths continue to come to light. You become part of a community dedicated to understanding the full, unvarnished story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of this rise and fall shocked you the most? And tell us, which other legendary figures from the shadowy pages of history should we examine next? Your curiosity fuels our search. This is not just our story, it is yours. So, subscribe now, and let's keep uncovering the truth, together.